You're listening to Out of the Box with Rosie Tran. I'm here with J.D. Walker, screenwriter and professor of documentary films at Santa Clara University. How are you today?
I'm doing good. Thanks so much for having me on the show.
I am really happy and excited to have you here. You've done some amazing things recently in the past few years.
Oh, good.
And I wanted to talk about your films. You have 3 films that you're working on right now. One that is in production called The Postwoman, which...
It's in development.
It's in development. The story that you've told me about is amazing. I'd love to share that with listeners. And then you won the Sundance Film Festival Screenwriting Contest.
I did, yeah.
With a screenplay called Oscar Michaud, and also your were just optioned to write a screenplay called Black Wall Street. So let's talk about The Postwoman. I like this story because it has a transgender, kind of not transgender, but you know, right now it's really, really big in the media, the issue of gay marriage and people coming out, and it's kind of like a heated issue, and your film addresses this.
Yeah, it does. I think the topic is timely, not only because it addresses a queer woman of color's experience coming out, particularly as a mother to her husband and to her children, but it also helps to, you know, bring more complex roles and more give more complex roles to African American actresses. You know, if we look at most of the images of African American women on screen, they're mostly stereotypical images, and a lot of the roles that I see as a black woman writer and director for black women are really limiting in the sense that, you know, they're either sapphires or they're matriarchs, or, you know, they're not really human.
We talked about that a little bit. Well, not us, but it was talked about a little bit last year, or maybe it was 2 years, I'm not sure. But so The Help, you know, was like a big film. And there was a lot of criticism that, hey, here is a film where the actress is getting an Oscar nod for being a black house servant.
Right.
And then over, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago, Gone with the Wind, you know, it's the same role, you know, with the black servant woman. And then 50, 60 years later in Hollywood, it's like the same thing over and over and over again.
Right. It is quite ironic to see, you know, these same images, you know, and black women being rewarded, you know, for playing these images, you know, that most white audiences may be used to us, you know, being. So, you know, a lot of these roles are, you know, I don't want to discredit the role of black women as domestics because, you know, black women...
It's historic.
Yeah. They've contributed greatly to, you know, our, you know, other generations of, you know, domestics, you know, so black women as, you know, doing domestic work has been very profound, you know, and inspiring. But yet and still, I still believe that, you know, there's room for more roles for African American women on screen, not just as the house servant or the domestic shucking and jiving.
I think Hollywood is kind of behind reality in a way, and it's kind of ironic because you think, you know, people are making movies and films, and a lot of people that make creative work are artistic and forward thinking, yet there's this structure from, you know, the corporatized studio system or the corporatized television system that kind of keeps things a very certain way. And, you know, I talk about this evolution as everything is about 10, 20 years behind. So about 20 years ago, you had, for example, Rosie Perez. And Rosie Perez was always playing the sassy Latina. She was never a person. She was always the sassy Latina. And then about, you know, 10 years after that, you know, Jennifer Lopez finally got the opportunity to play a normal person,
right,
not just a Latina.
Right.
And you can see that. I mean, if you look at, you know, some of the movies from the 80s, all the Latina characters are just these sassy Latina, spicy Latina, total stereotype. And it took 10, 20, 30 years for J-Lo to just be a lead.
I think a lot has to do with that, with the writers, you know, who are writing the screenplays, you know, and I think that it's very important for African-American writers and, you know, women of color to write their own material, you know, to help humanize us on screen, because nobody's going to do it for us. You know, I think it's our responsibility, you know, to do that.
But what do you think about the difficulty of getting, I mean, you've won this amazing screenplay competition, but there's also something to be said about, you know, it's very difficult for women to break in the industry. There's all these initiatives and all these programs, these diversity programs and everything, and that's a great opportunity for women to get in. But you still look in writing rooms on TV shows and other things, and they tend to be 95% or more white, male, middle-aged, a very specific demographic. And Tina Fey writes about this in her book, where she just talks about being a female comedy writer, not even a woman of color, just a woman.
Right. Yeah.
And she talks about, hey, it's impossible.
I think Sundance, addressed this too, the problems of, women filmmakers, women directors, just being accepted into film festivals and having their films screened and acknowledged. I think that, for women in general, it's a problem, that we are a minority in this industry.
But why do you think that is? I remember being in high school and having amazing women writers in my English class and smarts. But so what is the difference between why do men take it to that professional level and women are still in the minority in this field, when it seems like other areas of the business world and the working world, since women have transitioned mainly into the workforce in the 60s and 70s, we're making major inroads to the point where men are being pushed out. Yet in writing and in media, it's still this overflow of just white males.
It is, yeah. And I think people hire who they know, and we know that men have largely dominated the industry. That doesn't mean that women have been on set as production crew, behind the scenes, or even, in front of the camera, writing and directing. But I just read a study that was looking at the academy and looking at the lack of diversity within the academy. And we see that 90%, or at least 98% of the production jobs, are mostly occupied by white males. And even if you're looking at LGBT cinema or LGBT scripted characters on television, GLAAD did another study showing that, most of the characters that we see that are gay on screen are mostly white males. And so, there's something to say for women writers, for LGBT writers, and women of color for stepping up to the plate to help to, shift what we are seeing on screen.
I think it's really important. I know as an actress, I get the same audition every week. What are you doing? There's like three or four roles that I get, and that's it. I will either be a nurse / nail salon worker, or some type of prostitute, hooker, or valedictorian, and it's kind of like yeah, exactly.
Quite limiting. So somewhat broad, but a little limiting.
It just makes me laugh because I've read some scripts, that I've been sent for myself as an Asian woman. And it's kind of like, it's so dehumanizing. It's kind of, like in the 50s, they had the stereotype of the dragon lady Asian, right, or, the immigrant or whatever. And it seems to be one extreme or the other. Either I'm a, prostitute that doesn't speak English, some kind of creepy, like, erotic, fantasy for, obviously, like, very obviously a male white writer. You're like, okay, this was not written by a woman at all.
Searching for hotties on set today, right?
Exactly.
At 5 o'clock.
Or, I'm like the nerdy Asian girl character, and I'm like, okay, I know Asian women of all different personality types that fit every single spectrum, yet there's only these 2, 3, 4 roles being written over and over and over again. And it's kind of tiring. I'm like, when is this going to be over?
Yeah.
When can I just be a person?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, even searching, as a black woman, I think for women of color, these stereotypes are still ingrained, within, a lot of these writers who are writing these films where they feel like, to have some diversity on set, they can have, one character that, fulfills this stereotype. But I still think that, it's up to us, to expose, these problems in the industry and to raise more awareness about it and to really start writing our own material and directing our own material and giving more opportunities for women of color, as writers. Because I think one of the biggest problems is that we don't have access, to a lot of the screenwriting programs, maybe film programs that others may be getting. primarily because you're talking about how it's a closed, network, that's largely occupied by white males. But, it really is, we all know that the industry is really about who you know. And so there's power in, networking and in social media. And I think that women really must come together and create our own, distribution models and networks. Ava DuVernay is doing that now with her Affirm program. She's promoting and distributing the work of other African American writers and filmmakers, and they not only include women directors, but people who are really about making social change and really about reversing these stereotypes. You talk about the devaluation of our images on screen, and so I just think that we should band together as women, right?
Yeah,
women of color, and produce our own material.
That is just powerful. Okay, so let's talk about the Postwoman, and then we'll move on to the other two films. So the story is about a gay black woman.
It is.
She's a postwoman.
She's a postal worker who is facing a layoff as well as an impending divorce. And it's on her postal route one morning that she walks into this independent women's bookstore, and she meets another woman there by the name of Nia. And Nia really introduces her to other books about LGBT parenting because the character is interested in becoming more of herself. And so,
she's been hiding her true personality, her true essence.
Exactly. So it's a film that it's not just a coming out film, but it really looks at the private journey that mothers take, on their quest to really open up to their children about their sexuality and their partner. And so the film is about how a woman of color addresses these complex issues of, gender oppression, racial oppression, sexism, all at the same time. So it looks at intersectionality from a black woman's perspective.
Now, are these characters that you're writing based on people that you know in real life, or is it just you write from pure fantasy? You're like just coming up, with whatever left and right, or is this a story that's familiar to you from people in your personal life?
I think it's familiar in the sense that I have a number of lesbian friends who have children. I don't have children myself. But I've always...
But you do have an adorable furry son.
I do. My baby. He's a 2-year-old lab, and his name is Bailey. That's the only child I have right now. Yeah,
you're still a mom. Mix. You're still a mommy.
I am still a mommy. I'm not a mother of a human, however. Although I would like to be. I think I'd like to adopt down the line, too, as well. But I have friends who have children, and they are in committed relationships with other women, and I always found it intriguing. Also, as a student, I went to Howard University. I graduated there with my PhD in African American literature.
So I should be calling you Dr. Walker.
You can call me Dr. Walker, but I like Jamie. I use Jamie for film, so that's fine. Actually, I use JD for film. But, I was going to college with students who were my age, who had parents that were gay, and I didn't share their experience or, their reality. And, I always found it intriguing how their parents were able to battle, going to work every day. Yeah, just to defeat these stereotypes. And here they were, a happy, loving home. They had children. The children were straight. The children were successful. They were defeating all these stereotypes that LGBT women can't parent.
Well, I want to talk about that because I grew up having a friend that had two gay fathers. And there's this huge push with certain, maybe not politically conservative, but socially conservative people that say, the kids are going to be messed up. They're going to have all these issues because how are they going to know who's the daddy and mommy and blah, 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 blah. And there's this kind of bar, and it's part of the gay marriage issue.
It is.
Because a lot of people are saying, well, if, you let gays get married, then they can adopt. And I think that stems from the belief system that being gay is something that's morally wrong and socially deviant, and that they're teaching these behaviors to their kids, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're saying you have all these friends who have, are gay or homosexual, and they have kids, and they're fine and healthy and great.
Right.
So where do you think these stereotypes come from?
I think that... Well,
because if they're not based, obviously you know these people and they're not based in reality. You see them and they're doing a great job. And it would be better, in my opinion, to have two loving parents than to have a single parent that's struggling and or two abusive parents.
Of course.
Yet there's this anger and resentment and just push against the homosexual community and getting married and having families, which in my mind destigmatizes homosexuality as this deviant thing and shows that they're just normal people. It's not like they want to go around running around having group orgies. Right. They actually want to have families and just be normal people. Exactly. They just have this thing.
Exactly. Yeah. I think, what's most important is that, we know that the American Psychological Association, there have been several studies that LGBT parents have been able to raise children, in a healthy environment, and that those children come out just as healthy, if not, better socially, than other children who are heterosexual, and so I think it's just important to continue debunking these myths. I think that that's one of my goals as a writer to address these social issues on film, because I'm a former journalist. And so, I love doing research and, I think my expertise is writing and directing. More so than being an advocate or being political. I'm not that person who can go on a talk show and talk about politics for 1 hour. I just can't do it. It's not in my spirit, but I like working behind the scenes and using my work to affect change as a writer.
And so your story really shows that, she's a mom, she's struggling with this, and she's a good mom. She wants to be a good mom, right?
Right.
She just is struggling with this inner turmoil.
Exactly. And I don't think that we really see the realities of homophobia on screen, even on TV. I mean, when we look at shows like Will and Grace or
Modern Family, it's fun. It's like fun.
They're all comedies, and we rarely see a drama that really addresses the reality of triple oppression, for women of color. And that's by their gender, their race, or their class, or their sexuality.
Now, what do you think about kind of double racism? I don't know what it would call double bigotry. Because there seems to be, there's all these polls that are done that there seems to be a very high percentage of homophobia within the African American community.
It's very conservative. It's very true.
So why do you think that is? Because this is a group of people that have been oppressed themselves, yet they're... it tends to be anti-gay.
That's true. I think that people have a right to believe what they will believe. I was raised in the church. I was raised by two straight parents, but it doesn't mean that I cannot acknowledge a relationship, by two people, who are in love with each other, regardless of their gender, or their class, and everybody is not as open, as we are. I think that the problem is where we're trying to force our beliefs onto other people, whether it's through the church or, just through, any kind of dogmatic religion. I believe personally in, a world in which we can learn to accept each other, and to acknowledge our differences, to celebrate our differences, and to celebrate love and peace and harmony on the planet. It's not my job to judge, what somebody else does, or, how they choose to live their lives. That's not my role, and I don't ever want to tell anyone, what they can do and what they can't do. So, as far as conservatism in the Black church, or the church being very conservative on gay issues, it's very true. There's been a lot of studies on how conservative the Black church has been, on issues toward gay rights. There's a new documentary out right now that's called The New Black, and it looks at homophobia within the Black church, particularly around the quest for gay marriage in Maryland. And it's a great documentary. It's been winning a lot of awards.
I want to check it out. That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's produced by Yvonne Welbon.
Is it available online or?
It is available. It's not available online. It's currently screening at film festivals.
Okay, got it. I'll look out for it in the next few months.
It just screened at the Pan-African Film Festival I believe it was up for an NAACP award too as well. So it's been doing very well.
That sounds like a very interesting story.
It is a great story. Yeah, it is a great story. And the producers did an exceptional job with that film.
Well, the problem with a lot of these issues, I would like to know personally, as not just as someone who has a podcast or a comedian or to make fun of things or whatever, bring light to them, or an actress or whatever. I just want to know for my information because I want to understand where people are coming from. And it seems to be that with a lot of these issues, these social issues, people take things very personal and get very upset and sometimes they don't even have a reason or an explanation. I know so many people who say, well, that's just wrong. I just think it's wrong.
That's just what they believe.
That's just what they believe. And I'll say, well, why do you think it's wrong? And they don't have any follow-up.
Right.
There's just, well, that's wrong. Or, I have friends.
It's ingrained.
I have a lot of issues with clarity within the illegal immigration debate. I don't fully understand the debate. My parents came here legally. And so I have asked many Hispanic American friends to explain to me what their point of view is for or against it, whatever their point of view. And people get so heated and so angry that they can't even verbalize to me what their belief is. And
I spoke with a friend recently, and we were talking about how in this day and age, it's hard for us to even have a dialogue.
I just want to have a dialogue. I just want to know what people's opinions are.
Intellectual conversation about the issues. Someone was talking to me about how, journalism has changed and, these talk radio shows, everybody's
talking on top of each other. Bill O'Reilly's like yelling at you.
Shaming each other. Oh, God. I would never want to be a person on that show because, I feel that I'm not really as articulate, verbally, but, if you give me some paper and a pen, I can.
You can write it down.
Like, let me write it down first, and then I'll get back to you.
There isn't. I really don't think there is a legitimate dialogue. I think people get really heated, like you said. These shows, people are yelling at each other, shaming them, trying to, oh, well, the Republicans are like this, and the Democrats are just idiots, or
I get turned off,
or the Tea Party people are idiots. Yeah, and I literally just wanted to know, hey, what is your point of view on this? Because I don't understand the issue. And I have several friends who just got so angry and heated, and I wasn't attacking them. I wasn't even saying anything. I was just saying, hey, what is your viewpoint? I don't understand the issue. And I've done so much research online on certain issues, and I cannot find for some issues, for some social issues, I can't really find an objective point of view because there's always some slant. There's always some extreme point of view. And I just think that we're lacking that intelligent conversation where people are...
I think you have the power as a talk show host to really go deeper with those questions and to ask them, when did they first learn about this? Or how did they first hear about this? What is your upbringing?
There'll be a lot of fighting on the podcast.
Because we've all had, different upbringings. I mean, I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I'm glad to be, to have been raised in a diverse environment where I was exposed to the arts. The arts did so much for me as a writer and just as a human being, And I think the problem is people are just not exposed to other cultures, to other people who are different from them. And so the images that they are getting, they're bombarded with them from the media, or what they get from other people or from these sick talk shows where they're getting misinformation. So I think it just all depends on where are you getting your information. Are you getting them from these talk shows or are you getting them from the source? From the real people, the real human people who are dealing with these issues on the streets.
That is very important. Well, I am excited. What stage of development is the film?
The Postwoman is my first feature script, and it did earn honorable mention in the Sundance Table Read My Screenplay contest.
You are just all over Sundance.
Somebody is looking out for me. If you're out there, Sundance, thank you so much. But that was my first feature script, and writing that film really opened doors for the other feature films that I'm working on now.
That's great.
Which includes the biopic about Oscar Micheaux, and I'm not sure if you know who he is.
I don't. Tell me more.
So Oscar Micheaux is the very first Black director to produce a feature-length film. And he produced his first feature-length film in 1918 during the height of the race riots in Chicago. And between the years of 1919 and 1945, he went on to produce over 40 feature-length films.
Oh, wow.
And half of them were silent films.
I was going to say, are these silent films?
They are silent films, yeah. And he was producing, writing, and directing his films during the same time that Charlie Chaplin, was on the scene with S&A Pictures. Charlie Chaplin was also in Chicago around 1914 and 1916. He really became famous during that time period. But no one, really chronicled Michaud in the press other than the black newspapers like the Chicago Defender or the New York Amsterdam News. And so this is a feature film that shows his journey as an African-American man, pre-civil rights era.
No, so he was in Chicago.
He was in Chicago.
It was a little bit more liberal. It wasn't like he was in, Kentucky or something.
Not necessarily liberal, but
more open to it. I mean, he was able to make the films. He wasn't barred from doing so. This was a time
he was barred. Yeah, he did suffer a lot of discrimination from the Chicago Censorship Board because a lot of his films were about lynching, interracial marriage, and dating.
Wow, back in 1918?
Exactly.
That is a big deal.
Isn't it a big deal?
I was like, whoa, in 1918?
Yeah, I believe he was one of the first filmmakers to show an interracial kiss on scene.
And they allowed it.
Yeah, and you can imagine that, this is during the height of the Ku Klux Klan. D.W. Griffith's film, The Birth of a Nation, screened in 1915.
Which, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, D.W. Griffith's film, Birth of a Nation, was considered at the time a masterpiece. If you watch it now.
You can see, where there's, innovation in cinema, but
it's quite racist. It's a quite
number of stereotypes.
It's a quite racist film, and it glorifies the Ku Klux Klan.
It does,
and also kind of definitely reinforces the stereotype of of the white woman's fear of the black male. After her and all these other...
The black man is buck, is rapist, wanting to rape black women and,
White women.
White women, yes. So it did deal with the whole fear of, miscegenation and just maintaining the purity of the white race. And so Oscar Michaud came along, just...
So how was he at this time able to make films in such a racist time? This is 1918 America. Like you said, civil rights isn't even passed. Right. Slavery was just abolished, 50 years before that? So how was he able to do this? This is amazing.
It is quite amazing. He was a very savvy businessman, and he decided to relocate to a homestead in South Dakota. And it was on his homestead that he started writing autobiographies, fiction. So he wrote his first book in 1918. It was called The Homesteader, about his life on the farm and really kind of tilling his own farm. And, he went door to door to his neighbors asking them to buy stock in his film company because he always wanted to write screenplays. He was very savvy. He was a businessman. He could sell anything.
That sounds extremely savvy. I would never think that. This is like Kickstarter before Kickstarter.
It was Kickstarter, right? Exactly.
He's like, give me $5 to make my movie about black and white people kissing.
Yes.
In 1918. That is hilarious.
Black and white people. What's so interesting about his films is that Oscar Michaud he married a black woman, but he also had this intense love for this white woman. It's a Scottish girl who he met on a homestead. And he never, ever forgot this woman, and she reappears in all of his films. And he could never really consummate his relationship with this Scottish girl because of the fears of miscegenation, right? And so in most of his films, that deal with colorism, discrimination, due to the amount of melanin in your skin, the way that he is able to resolve his love for this Scottish girl is that there's always a black male character who cannot marry this woman who's light enough to pass for white, because of the black bourgeoisie and, just different class issues within the black community itself. And so he's able to resolve this issue by showing how the Scottish girl has at least one drop of black blood. And so always by the end of the film, we learn that she's not really white. She's really black. She has one drop of black blood. And so then they can get married and then they kiss.
It's kind of like the Native American test. Like they have, if you have one tiny drop of Native American blood, you can get that scholarship to college.
Well, that's hilarious.
It's true. They if you have any Native American blood and you people try to prove it any way, shape, or form because there's so many benefits
Yeah, and
with higher education.
Yeah, very true. And, you know, that's how he was able to resolve his
personal turmoil in his films.
Yes. And, you know, he was criticized, you know, because most of his leading women in his early silent films were fair-skinned women. And so he faced a lot of stigma during the time that he was filmmaking from his own community.
I was going to say, was he stigmatized by the black or the white community, or both?
Both, yeah. Both at different time periods in his life. You know, and he was such a complex figure. He laid the groundwork for, you know, like you said, the whole Kickstarter revolution. Because Chicago,
back in the day, door to door with his stock certificates.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it was. And Chicago is home to the vaudeville or the Chitlin circuit. And so Michaud relocated to Chicago after being on this homestead and decided to, you know, try his hand at filmmaking. So he moved to Chicago, started freelancing for the Chicago Defender as a journalist, and then writing his own screenplays. And then he went door to door to all of the African-American theaters in the South, you know, encouraging them to, you know, sell his films.
That does sound like a really good businessman. Is he originally from the South, or do you know? Because Michaud sounds like a French...
It is.
And I know there was a lot of French Creole and French Cajun, mixture.
His father was, I can't remember the ethnicity of his father, so, you know, I'm not going to mention that. But his father was a fair-skinned man, and both of them were former slaves from a Kentucky plantation. I'm not sure where, but Michaud and his brothers and sisters, they were born in Metropolis, Illinois.
Yeah, because Michaud was a French. I think a French.
It definitely is.
How did you find this story to even write about it? Were you a fan of his films before?
I was. That's a great question. I had never even seen an Oscar Michaud film until, I believe it was the fall of 2009. So fairly recently, I discovered his first film. Actually, his second film, it's called Within Our Gates, and it was a film he did in 1919, which was a direct response to D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, really seeking, again, to demystify these stereotypes on screen by, you know, portraying African Americans in leading roles as doctors, you know, policemen, lawyers. And I was teaching an African-American independent cinema class, and I wanted to look at some early African-American filmmakers before the Harlem Renaissance era, so like post-Reconstruction era. And that's how I discovered the films of Oscar Michaud. I think I discovered the film online, and, you know, I was just amazed that here was this feature-length film, a silent film, directed by a black man,
with black leading characters.
Yes, and it was beautiful. I mean, it was a beautiful story. You know, it's as complex and as innovative as any D.W. Griffith film in terms of what he was doing, you know, with the camera.
Technically,
yes, it's technically sound, although, you know, he didn't have the production funds, you know, to be as you know, they weren't high production value, but if you really study his films, you can see that, you know, the innovation.
He knew what he was doing.
Oh, yeah. He was very sharp. You know, and he was very well trained, you know, self-trained man.
So why do you think that he doesn't get as much recognition or notice as D.W. Griffith or Charlie Chaplin or someone during that time who was making films? Because there weren't that many filmmakers at the time. And, you know, I have a degree in film and television studies, and I've studied, you know, all of the films that you're talking about. And, you know, the average person doesn't know. I know, you know, if I said D.W. Griffith, the average person in middle America is not going to know who the heck D.W. Griffith is. But if you're in the film world,
you will. Yeah.
So I know these names that you're talking about, and, you know, but I never heard of Oscar Michaud. Why do you think he's not getting the recognition? I spent 4 years in school studying this stuff, and, you know, French New Wave, et cetera, and the name Oscar Michaud never appeared.
It's the same reason why black writers and filmmakers still struggle to gain distribution and to gain recognition today. You know, we talked about that, how it's really largely a closed network, and so we don't get the press, you know, if we don't cover our own, you know, material and our own stories. The only reason why we know about Michaud is because other black writers and other black journalists decided to review his films. He wasn't being reviewed by white critics. If you look at the early cinema magazines that were produced in Chicago, specifically like Movie Maker magazine.
He's not listed.
Moving Picture World. He's not even listed. And that's from 1900 all the way up through like the 30s and the 40s. And so these filmmakers were shunned out, and, of course, people knew that they were screening at this time period. So it was largely films. These were movies. They were called race movies, and that's because they were by blacks, for blacks, for the empowerment of blacks, even though whites, and blacks and other people of color enjoyed these films as well. But I do think that that's very interesting. It speaks to the struggle of, independent filmmakers to find visibility for their works.
I think it's really, really difficult, especially since, it is a system. There's a studio system. And even back then, there was a studio system. Right. Kodak and other companies kind of had monopolies.
Yeah, blacks couldn't even get on the set, of Universal. Back when Michelle was...
They had white actors in blackface.
Yes.
They didn't have...
Right.
And that
we couldn't even perform, as
a black person.
Yeah.
I'm laughing about it, but it's just so silly because why on earth would you hire a white actor to put black makeup on when you could have probably, as a business perspective, hire a black actor to be more authentic in the role?
It's about control.
And actually, you could probably get away with paying the black actor less at the time. So it sounds like a better business plan to hire a black actor to play a black actor instead of putting blackface.
That. But, it's about maintaining control, and giving people access, open doors. And when you open doors, people have the potential to come in and possibly take your job.
Yeah.
And to take over.
I laugh at some of the films.
Disturbing.
There is a lot of blatant racism in some of the early Hollywood films, and I'm not even offended by it. I mean, I saw a film on the Hallmark Channel about 5 years ago. It was an old film.
You said you're not offended by it.
I'm not, because it's so over the top that it's like I'm sad that it's a part of history, but looking at it from a modern perspective, I can't remember what the film is, and I wish I could remember because I'm going to find the name of it and post it in the...
Please post it on your website,
I will.
Which is...
my website, outoftheboxpodcast.com, which will have the podcast listed, and I'll put it in... I'll try to remember, or maybe I'll add an amendment to the podcast later. But I was doing comedy up in Northern California. I was in my hotel room, and so I was getting ready for my show, and I was just killing time, and I had the Hallmark Channel on, and they had this film from... It must have been pre-40s.
Okay, I wonder what it was. Was it a musical?
It wasn't. And they had... The storyline was... It was a Western, and the storyline was that this gunslinger falls in love with an Asian woman. And the Asian woman was played by a white woman, and they had put really slanty eye makeup on her.
Wow.
I mean, it's comedic to me, JD, awful. Because it's so awful, right?
Yes.
And part of the storyline when I turned on the TV, and I'm surprised Hallmark Channel even played this because it was so offensive. They were in the... So she was Chinese, and he had brought her to a restaurant in the small, it was like a Wild West town, and they brought her spaghetti. And she choked on the spaghetti. Her character choked on the spaghetti because she didn't know how to chew noodles.
Wow.
And she said, she was like, didn't speak English. And he gave her a fork, and she didn't know how to use a fork because it was in chopsticks.
What was this film? We need to know what it is
I'll find out.
Immediately.
But the funny thing is, one, completely historically inaccurate in every single way, because if you follow the history of the world, part of the trade with Marco Polo and all these, traders to the east was to get noodles and spices from China and Asia. And that's where the Italians got noodles from China. So they have this Chinese character, and she's choking on spaghetti noodles because she doesn't know how to eat. And also, when did being Asian mean you don't know how to chew?
Yeah, very sad.
So it's like, I'm not even offended by these things because the racism is so blatantly ridiculous.
I think you are offended. I don't know if that's the right term. I think you're deeply offended and you're deeply disturbed by it. But we just were so bombarded with it. We had to pick and choose what we allowed to receive. Am I going to receive that today? No, I didn't just see that. At least for me, that's what I have to do. You can't, take in all this information because, if you do, you will just believe that you're worthless, you're useless, you've made no contributions to society.
What I thought was that the filmmakers were worthless. They weren't making a contribution to society, and they didn't know.
Who is this writer?
And they didn't know anything about Asian women because they had,
should have wrote the stage.
I should have. They had some actress with like this thick, slanty-eyed makeup, and it was, and they had that. They have, in Breakfast at Tiffany's, they have, the Chinese character with the buck teeth, and
right.
So it's just anything pre, I would say 1950 or 1960. The Asian characters are like, are you for real?
Yeah. It's very true.
So that is interesting, and then I want to. We have a little time, but we're chatting quite a bit.
Yeah,
so I want to get
it's
into
great.
Black Wall Street. So you have just been commissioned to write a screenplay for the film Black Wall Street.
I have.
Tell me about this.
So this is a new film that just kind of fell in my lap. There's a website. I'm not sure if you know of it. It's called stage32.com.
I don't. Tell me.
So it's a fairly new website. I don't even know how old it is. Maybe 3 to 5 years old. But it's a place in which writers, screenwriters, any kind of production crew can post their films, and then they can find cast and crew for their films.
That's great. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, they could just email each other. So my film for Oscar Michaud is on there. It just says that I'm the screenwriter, hopefully the director of my own doggone film. I hope you're listening. I hope my producer is listening to this.
Who determines those things? Who determines whether or not you can direct your own film?
It's just up to, I think, the producer and the director. I think, if you are a director and if that's what you want to do, if you want to direct your own film, then you make a case and say, I want to direct it. But of course, if it's going to be studio finance, maybe it's up to the financing.
So it depends on the money. The money dictates it.
It does. Money often dictates it, but it doesn't mean that, you can't direct your first feature film. Mm-hmm. And I'm pushing to direct my own doggone film.
And I see with the passionate look in your eyes that you're going to get it.
Because it's my project. You know what I mean? It's like the most... I think I'm more passionate about the Oscar Michaud film than I am about the other films. Yeah. I am. I'm passionate about both of them. But, this is something that I'm really, really, drawn to. Drawn to this story. Because after the Postwoman, I've really taken some time to really study screenwriting, as a profession, and to really look more about the story and, creating believable characters. I've just done more research. And, I've grown, I'm still growing as a screenwriter, and I'm still like trying to devour as many screenplays as I can. So I could see like the growth in my own writing. Mm-hmm. And I really see it more in the feature film about Black Wall Street. So I was trying to tell you that the name of that film is actually called 1921. Mm-hmm. And it looks at the bombing of an all-Negro town in 1921 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, a lot of people may know of this story, but it was a all-Negro town that was bombed by rioters who were in downtown Tulsa after a Negro boy by the name of Dick Rollin was accused of raping a white woman. And, this boy was held in the Tulsa County Jail, and the black community from Tulsa came down to defend them. And when they came down to defend him at the Tulsa County Jailhouse, a riot ensued. And the mostly white rioters from Tulsa descended on this all-Negro town, and they torched it. They poured gasoline on the churches, the Negro schools, all the black villages, and they set the town on fire. And subsequently, the Tulsa government or the police department, they called in authorities, and the town was also bombed from the sky. And so it's a part of American history that we don't like to deal with, or address, this bombing of this all-Negro town. It's amazing that a lot of us don't really know about the atrocity that happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1921.
So why is it called Black Wall Street? Why is that the pending name?
It's not called Black Wall Street. It's actually called 1921. It's temporarily titled
1921.
temporary. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's been very intriguing to go in and do all this research on Tulsa, which was formerly called Tallahassee. It was a town that was formerly occupied by Native American Indians. But, of course, after President Andrew Jackson signed the Indian Removal Act in 1830, thousands of, Native American Indians, Cherokee, and Creeks were slaughtered in this town called Tallahassee, which means small town. And white settlers moved in and took over the town because they discovered oil there, and so it does have a complex history. African Americans who had migrated north from the south seeking better opportunities set up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in a small town called Greenwood. And that was home to Black Wall Street. And it was primarily called Black Wall Street because Jim Crow laws were still prevalent in southern Tulsa, in downtown Tulsa. And so, their access was restricted. There were still lynchings that were rampant. And so they just decided to set up their own community where they would support their own businesses. They would keep the dollars circulating within their own communities. So they built their own churches, their own schools, their own pool halls, confectionaries, salons. It was this whole, thriving neighborhood, well-to-do, upper to middle class neighborhood. And that was threatening to a lot of World War I veterans who were returning home after the war and they didn't have jobs, and they go up to Greenwood and they see this thriving Negro town, and they're unemployed. And so that incited a lot of fear and animosity and anger and jealousy.
That is very interesting. What strikes me, now back to what you originally said, I didn't want to interrupt you, but you're talking about the Indian Exclusion Act. And what you described, this is so sad, sounds a lot like what's going on right now in the Middle East. Because you said, they found oil and the Native Americans were slaughtered and white families moved in. And it sounds like we're kind of repeating history because right now we're, bombing the heck out of Afghanistan and other places that happen to be extremely resource rich. Right. And then putting American contractors in.
Oh, yeah, that's very profound.
So when you said that,
I just speaking truth right now.
I just thought of that, and I think that's why it's really, really important for us to study history, because we're making a lot of the same mistakes, and I think it's up to us as a human consciousness to raise our awareness level and say, hey, we are evolving, we're growing, we don't have to make these same mistakes over and over and over again. Because when things happen in the moment, people always say, well, we couldn't foresee the future, we didn't know all the damage we were going to do because of, XYZ. Yeah, we do know the damage because we did it 50, 100 years ago.
Right, exactly. Exactly. I think that's why we need to vote. And also I think that it's important to continue to raise awareness about these issues, that are happening all over the world, in the Middle East, and other parts of the world, and to ensure that we vote so that we can get people into Congress who will, advocate on behalf of, all human beings, and so that we can have, a planet in which, love rules the planet, fairness and equality and tolerance. I think that that's important.
I just don't understand the constant obsession with exploiting natural resources and exploiting people instead of finding a sustainable way of living. And I don't think it's a progressive or liberal agenda. It's a human agenda. Look, we can't just we're on one planet. This is what I don't get about these selfish ideologies. It's like, look, dum-dum, we all live on the same planet. We can't escape. Maybe.
And we're all affected by it.
We are all affected by it. Maybe
this area affects us.
Maybe in 10, 20, 30, 300 years, we'll be able to live on Mars. But right now, everyone's trapped on this rock we call Earth. And everything that you do
on the rock.
And everything you do affects other people. So when people are, poisoning food supplies with genetically modified food, when people are doing all sorts of things, it's like, look, dum-dum, you live here too. Like, why are you polluting the air, et cetera, when you have to live here? Not just me. You have to live here. We haven't established individual biosphere domes around us.
No,
you know,
we
individual
share resources. We share the water. You know, we share the air. You know, we share the planet.
So that is very interesting.
Yes. Can I give you the website?
Yes. Tell me everything so I can share with my listeners.
Sure. So the 1921 film about the bombing of Black Wall Street, you can find out more about that. It's on Black Wall Street. I believe it's movie.com. blackwallstreetmovie.com.
Do you guys have a Kickstarter for raising money, or are you guys self-producing?
Not for that one. I believe it's going to be studio produced. But as far as I know right now, we're just at the script stage. So I'm only on Act 2 in that one. So wish me luck. I have to get through Act 2, and then we'll come back and maybe do some more shows. But it's been announced that I'm one of the co-writers on this film with another amazing writer and artist. His name is Funk Face, and he's the original story creator. I'm just helping him to write the screenplay.
Okay, and then Oscar Michaud?
Sure. So the Oscar Michaud feature film, you can find out more about that on our website. It's www.oscarmichaudmovie.com.
You got to spell Michaud. You got to spell Michaud for us.
You got to spell it. So it's Oscar and it's Michaud, and that's MICHEAUX.com. And I have to tell you something.
Yes.
So the same producer, Presnell Holmes, who produced Malcolm X, Spike Lee's Malcolm X in 1992, he's going to be producing the Oscar Michaud feature film with my co-producer, Monica Cooper. And they've produced a number of feature films, including the last film that was out. And, it escapes me right now. But they've done a number of films by Spike Lee, Thin Line Between Love and Hate. They've done a number of films together. I
am very excited for you. And the Postwoman is almost done and ready, or developmental?
It is. The script is finished, and we've successfully raised Kickstarter funds for our feature film. We've been chronicled in IndieWire, After Ellen, the Huffington Post. Our website for that film is www.thepostwomanmovie.com.
And you guys are on Twitter for updates?
We're also on Twitter. I use that Twitter for absolutely everything. So
I noticed.
I know, it's my first Twitter account, so I use it. It's @postwomanmovie, and I use it for all my other feature films.
And you guys, please support independent films. True independent films. And if you're a writer, get out there and get your stuff on paper, because we need diverse and interesting and unique writers. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Well put. Thank you so much. I haven't done a podcast in a long time, so thanks for putting up with me.
Well, we were very happy to have you guys. Please go on outoftheboxpodcast.com and click on the donate button. We're now accepting Litecoins and Bitcoins for all of you techie nerds out there in the Bitcoin world. And I need comments and subscribers on iTunes and Stitcher, so please leave a positive comment, and I will be sure to send you a goodie if you @ me on Twitter @FunnyRosie. Have a wonderful day, and thank you for being part of Out of the Box today.